All right. So, turns out that philosophy gets a bad rap in physics. And as the title of my talk suggests, I disagree with this attitude. And so, who is it exactly that's giving philosophy a bad rap? Well, it's these boys right here. So most of you should recognize these three. If not, that's okay. These are three acclaimed physicists who have had varying degrees of public attention. And look, first of all, these three guys in particular are not the entirety of the problem. What I'm going to be doing is using what they say as vehicles to talk about a broader culture and attitude that might exist in some areas of physics. And I want to make very clear that I'm not saying that these guys aren't good physicists. What I'm concerned about is what they talk about, the link between philosophy and physics. All right, so enough with the qualifications, let's go. So starting off with Hawking, he's said things to the effect of, well, you know, science has left philosophy in the dust. And very famously, that philosophy is dead. Now, I don't know about you, but claiming that an entire academic genre is dead is a pretty big claim. And as we know, as scientists, big claims require big evidence. Evidence that I put to you is not there. Now, look, just one response that we might have to Hawking's claim is that within it is the implicit assumption that the goals of physics and philosophy are the same, that they're asking the same kinds of questions, that they're looking for the same kinds of answers. But that's just not true. That's demonstrably false. It's a classic apples and oranges situation. If we, the fact is that philosophy asks fundamentally different kinds of questions than physics does, often non-empirical ones. And so pointing to the success of physics and going, look, philosophy could never have done that, to me isn't an argument against the merits of philosophy. It means you haven't understood what philosophy does. All right, so moving on to Krauss, and look, personally, I find him the most exhausting of the three we'll be looking at today, because to me, he embodies the dismissiveness that sometimes exists within the physics community, not only towards the humanities, but also to other fields of science. I'm looking at you, Rutherford. Come on. Now look, there are many examples you can find online of an academic from some other field responding to Krauss's work. And what do we get on the part of Krauss? Well, he calls them rude names. And look, putting aside the substance of what these people said about Krauss's work and the potentially very eloquent response from Krauss that I've just picked these quotes from, I think it's fair to say that this kind of elitist language just does physics no favors. And I think, you know, how do I know that this is not just Krauss and the rest of the physics community is actually fine? Well, unfortunately, apart from seeing it with my own eyes, I see it within myself. There's still a voice in the back of my mind that's eerily Kraussian. And as a physics community, we have to be aware of this if we want to promote and do physics in a worthwhile way. Now look, a final point to end on with Krauss is, at the start I said that these were all good physicists, but I think if we broaden our understanding of what it might mean to be a good physicist to one who acts ethically and responsibly to fellow colleagues, then I think it's fair to say that it's very questionable whether he is in that category or not. So moving on to Feynman.
Same.
Yes, maybe. So to me, he has the softest position out of the three we'll be looking at today, since he's quoted supposedly saying the following, that the philosophy of science is as useful to scientists as ornithology is to birds. Now, you'd be forgiven if you were a little bit confused about what point Feynman is exactly trying to make here. I sure was when I first saw this. But as far as I can tell, this is a roundabout way of saying, look, philosophy of science might be very interesting. You might even find out some cool things about science along the way. But the fact is that it's just not useful to scientists. And look, I can sympathize with this position. You know, if I'm an experimentalist tuning an experiment in my lab, or a theorist solving field equations on my whiteboard, that just doesn't seem like the kind of work that physics does. Oh, sorry, that philosophy does, no? But I think this position misses two crucial things. One, what it means to be a physicist involves more than tuning experiments and solving equations. And that other stuff of what it means to be a physicist involves, honest to goodness, no joke philosophizing. And look, just two really speedy examples I'll go through. One, if you're a theorist and you're trying to pick which new cutting edge theory to work on, well, the reasons that go into that are empirical. What does the past data suggest? But also they're philosophical, like undoubtedly, which theory is elegant and more beautiful. And for the experimentalists in the audience, the meteoric rise of Bayesianism, you can't read that, but that says Bayesianism, over frequentism in the last 100 years, is a classic example where there's a shift in philosophical perspective at its core. And it also gives us dank memes, apparently. Now, look, taking a step back, I think this question does beg to be answered more directly. Why does physics need philosophy? Well, put simply, it makes us better physicists. We can look at history. If we're in the business of knowledge production, then it's much like life in that it really flourishes at the boundaries of two ecosystems. And if history isn't convincing to you, there are challenges that face physics today that involve, at least in some part, a crucial philosophical aspect. I'll just run through a couple of the big names. Which interpretation of quantum mechanics is the correct one? What is the link between what our human experience says the world is like versus what the fundamental laws of physics tell us the world is like? How should we fund new and expensive experiments? And what kind of culture should we promote in our academic faculties? Each of these four, require us to engage with things other than the quote-unquote hard sciences. And we would be impoverished scientists if we didn't take advantage of the intellectual tools that philosophy and other fields give us. Now, just to conclude, we shouldn't judge or misunderstand other fields for having different goals to ours. We shouldn't be dismissive of other fields just because we think we're above them or better than them. And finally, we should be open and introspective to the idea that there might be more to physics under the hood that we could learn about, so as to do better and be better. Thank you very much.
Jules Rankin.